one that has that wants to switch bases.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so we have a quorum with you, and I'm going to go ahead and start, all right?
Is the subdivision reporting you're referencing in here? Yeah.
City's ready?
I doubt it. It's
All right, calling to order the Hayden City Planning and Zoning Commission. Today is Monday, July 18th, 2022. May we get a roll call of commission members, please?
Commissioner Bemis.
Here.
Let's see, Commissioner Howard,
here.
Vice Chair Taylor,
Here.
and Chair Davis.
I'm present.
Okay, so Commissioner Gibson and Commissioner Prickett are absent.
Okay,
Okay,
we shall roll on to the Pledge of Allegiance, yes?
yes.
Please follow me. Pledge of Allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have any additions or corrections to the agenda tonight? Okay. Does anyone have, of the commissioners, does anyone have a conflict of interest with any agenda item tonight?
No.
Hearing a no, okay. The next.
No.
Thank you, Brandon. Next item up is the consent calendar, which consists of the approval of minutes from May 16th, 2022, and of June 6th, 2022. Is there a need to discuss, or is there a motion?
I move you approve all items on the consent calendar.
There's a motion to approve the consent calendar,
Second.
and now there's a second. All in favor, say yes or aye. Yes?
Aye.
Aye.
And so I'm hearing no no's because that's 4 yeses. All right, now we'll move into the meat of the meeting tonight, which is a public hearing that consists of 2 cases, PZE 220046 and PZE 22076, referred to as Madison Capital Zone Map Amendment and Madison Ranch Subdivision. This corner wearing the blue trunks is Donnie.
Sound on that.
And could I ask those who have dialed in to please mute and then unmute when you speak? Thank you.
So, generally, the only time we hear 2 projects kind of concurrently at the same time are like a zone map amendment and a subdivision that come in concurrently on the same piece of property, or when we do planned unit development, usually a final PUD and a subdivision that come in at the same time, because much of the information is the same for both. It's just at the end of the process, the decisions are different, so we'll separate those out. So tonight we're looking at the Madison Capital Zone Map Amendment, which is PZE 220046, and we're looking at the Madison Ranch Phased Subdivision, which is PZE 220076. So the location is south of West Hayden Avenue, here in this blue. It is east of North Hutter Road. It's east of the Kootenai Electric Substation, which, by the way, is in the county, not in the city limits. It is west of what will become Carrington Street, going north and south in here. And it's west of the apartments that you've seen on West Hayden Avenue, south of Hayden. The applicant and engineer of record is Scott MacArthur, who's in the audience from MacArthur Engineering. And the owners are Madison Capital LLC, and we have Scott Kurtz, and Kiefer is on the phone. They're both here to represent their requests. So I just want to kind of lay a land before they kind of take the stage. Hey, Keith Gibson has just arrived. Make the record known. Current currently, the existing zone out for this location has about 300 feet south of Hayden Avenue that is zoned commercial, and the remainder of the property is zoned residential single family. And the future land use map shows about 600 feet plus or minus as being mixed use, and the remainder of the property being mixed residential. Their request is to change the commercially zoned property to mixed use, not do anything with the residential single-family zoned property. So it's a portion of what shows at the future land use map, and none of the residential is moving to anything. So just wanted to clarify that. That question had been raised. So also in your staff reviews, when we talked in the subdivision staff review, I believe, it was identified that in 2013, this property was annexed, and in that annexation, there was a restriction to 4 dwelling units per acre. So if you take the 18 plus or minus acres of this project site, you multiply by 4, you get 72 dwelling units. So should the zone map amendment request and the phase subdivision request be approved, and all the single-family lots within the subdivision are approved as the preliminary plat is drafted, and once the mixed-use design standards are met, if all of those things happen in a perfect storm, which they may because they've been working on this for a long time, but if that all happens in a perfect storm and it all works, then a possible breakdown could include no more than 72 dwelling units, or possibly 42 single-family residential lots and 30 multifamily dwelling units on that mixed-use, if it's approved, parcel. There's a lot of ifs and catches and possibles in there, but that gives you somewhat of a scenario. So that breakdown is based on the conclusions of the items identified above. So in a perfect storm, that's kind of what could happen. So the zone map amendment, again, that's the 46 number, is a request for the commercial along Hayden Avenue to migrate toward mixed use, with the remainder of the property to remain single-family residential. In this particular instance, that mixed use is part of that geographic location that abuts Hutter in the future land use map. So as such, it would have a mixed use designation of MU2. And as the applicant has requested for this lot to be used for both commercial and multifamily, that MU2 designation of that subcategory requires that a zoning development agreement be entered into in relationship to how that piece of property is developed. Keeping in mind that the total residential density for this whole site, this whole 18-acre piece of property, can only be 4 dwelling units per acre. Okay? Just kind of lots of pieces moving in that. Wanted to get that kind of cleared out. And then the second public hearing piece is that subdivision that goes with Project 76. It was identified in a staff review that they're a part of or finishing up or just finished up a boundary line adjustment with the property to the west. It's a phased subdivision request, and that's based on sewer basin lines predominantly. The mixed-use site is proposed to include both commercial and multifamily should the request for that zone map amendment be approved. Otherwise, it's commercial development. And this looks like a 42-lot residential single-family phased based on the availability with that one lot to the north. And there is a comment in here about the applicant requesting sewer basin transfer. So in your application, we showed you a preliminary plat or a proposed plat. This was what was in your staff review. It shows this area kind of grade in as being phase 2. Mostly in H8 sewer basin. And this area is being phase 1. This is a site plan, and it's there for pretty much conceptual purposes only to show how you could potentially meet the 10% required ground floor commercial that's required on this property, meeting those mixed-use design standards, and or how you could get some multifamily units on there. This is not a site plan review, keep that in mind, but it is conceptual to show how it could kind of lay out the land, all right? So with that, that's really the kind of general background, kind of laying the path. I'm going to turn it over to Scott, one of them. Which one of these do you want up first? This one?
Next one, no.
This one?
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to go sit back over there for a while. Probably take you a little while. By the way, for those of you that aren't aware, Rob Wright's our city engineer. Alan Soderling's our public works director. If you have questions, any of this I can answer.
Good evening, Commission. Scott MacArthur, MacArthur Engineering, P.O. Box 2488, Post Falls, Idaho 83877. Here tonight to present the Madison Ranch project. As Donna said, it's a little bit interwoven subdivision zone change. It's always hard to follow Donna, and I mean that in total sincerity because she goes through every bit of it, and she asks questions sometimes that even stump us. So that said, here we go. As Donna stated, the project location here is east of Hutter, east of the KEC substation, south of Hayden Avenue, and west of the Viking development with the apartment complex. This is the proposed conceptual design development, just trying to meet the regulations of the city, working with staff. We've gone through several renditions. I think I surprised Rob and Alan with this one, and we've discussed how we think this best fits the needs for my client, Madison Capital, and then also for the city. One of the big features of this development, proposed development, I guess, would be this north-south backage road. If you go back to, and Donna, I don't know how to go back. There we go. As you know, there's a Hutter bypass project that's in and out and back on again, off again. During the annexation process, Mr. Kimball, who owned this property originally, Jim Kimball, he agreed to dedicate a dimension off of the center line of Hutter Road that would basically absorb a large portion of this property. There were 2 parcels, and then Tom McNabb purchased the property. That dedication in the annexation agreement is still there. I believe now it's up to 300 feet of reservation that it can't be built. Nothing can be built there, no structures. It's basically just being reserved for the future Hutter bypass improvements. You've probably heard this before. Mr. McNabb retained a portion of the property of this first parcel, and then he sold the second parcel to my clients, who are basically being given the opportunity to develop a north-south road connecting Hayden Avenue to the properties that are south. I apologize for this. Properties that are south that won't have access to the Hutter bypass. This property here is future connection from Robeson, which would be located in this area, Carrington north-south, but they would have to traverse across the Viking property to get to their property. So the north-south road of what we're calling Downing Lane is basically an extension of a lane of a road in the city of Coeur d'Alene, south of Prairie. We're just arbitrarily picking a road name at this time. And that road traverses from Hayden Avenue to the south boundary line. This map is turned, as you can see. North would be to the right side of the screen, and this would be Downing Lane. Now, in order to make Downing Lane function for the development of this property and for the adjacent properties to the south and to the east, Downing Lane had to enter the site as close as possible to this north-south property line that we share with Viking. There's an existing sewer lift station located here in this corner just to the east of the proposed entrance, and that elevation in working with the city is quite low when compared to the city of Hayden Avenue and the improvements proposed for Hayden Avenue. And so my clients agreed to shift that approach over far enough to provide the walking trail that's required for Downing and also for stormwater improvements that won't flood the sanitary sewer lift station. In doing so, that eats up quite a bit of property in this area that'll essentially become right-of-way to the city. Just to something that's going to be given out, can't be built on, can't be used. In doing so, we've worked out some agreements with Viking, our neighbors, in the event they ever develop, that if we need additional space for stormwater, because we're offsetting this road, they'll work with us on that. We have that agreement in place. Just hasn't been a need to enact it at this time. And then one of our agreements with the city was that we could provide access onto Downing with residential homes. I think one of the initial submittals in your packet, I'm not sure if they received that, Donna, the initial subdivision layout. Okay, the initial subdivision layout had no access off of this Downing Road. And so I just wanted to bring to that point tonight that these lots here will all have direct access to Downing as what do we call it, a local collector street. And then we'll just have this loop road here that'll provide more of a secure neighborhood layout in the event that traffic needs to route around any issues here at Downing. They'll have that secondary route. Fire has issued a comment stating they are in favor of the proposed development layout and the configuration. And then as you see here, this is the area in question for the zone change. Try not to interweave it too much, but we'll go down that path as we come along. So in the zone map amendment area, the zone change, we're looking at 30 condo units, so single family residential ownership units, and a commercial facility that meets the 10% requirement as stated in the strategic master plan. The 30 units will vary in size. The layout, again, this is just conceptual, but the layout's to be determined based on the outcome of this request. We feel this is a great fit for the area because you have approximately 14 acres, to the west that's commercial property. And this will be a nice transition from the apartments, the Viking apartments, to a commercial mixed-use area with that residential feel, that not so tight, dense area, but you're working your way into a commercial node here at Hutter and Hayden to this side of the screen. It's always confusing when it's turned, I apologize. So we take a look into the amenities for that property. We've worked with Hayden Lake Irrigation District to develop their needs or combine their needs into the development process. And basically they're looking to extend their existing 12-inch main, water main to the west. And then again, from Mr. McNabb's property here to the west, further to the west past Hutter. They're also looking for a 12-inch water main to traverse south down Downing and then again north for future development across Hayden Avenue. Dry utilities, as you know, most of everybody is aware that this is the KEC substation. They do have large overhead lines that traverse Hayden Avenue, and they also they're also located on the south side of, they're located on the south side of Hayden Avenue on the east side of Hutter. And those large power lines will not provide the power. They will actually be, there's another source located adjacent by that will bring power into the development along with your dry utilities, internet, phone, cable, TV. Try not to be super redundant with what Don has already stated, but I'm new to this apparently. So the standards for subdivision approval, again, infrastructure. It can be constructed to function in a manner that promotes the public health, safety, and welfare. My job as a professional engineer is to design a project that meets the city requirements and provides those conditions, public health, safety, and welfare. So the infrastructure can be constructed and located in an orderly manner that accommodates ongoing maintenance needs when taking into consideration the collection of other infrastructure. To the west of this site is essentially a dead end. There will be no access point permitted, so this will be the collector for all traffic using that commercial property to the west. There will be no access to Hutter, there will be no access to Hayden. We're also providing a collection point down Dunkirk, which is this east-west road, right here, that will traverse east-west. This will be the collector, and that'll take traffic over to Carrington here to the east side, and also collect traffic from Downing here, running north-south. Infrastructure is or will be in compliance with applicable city and state federal policies and regulations. Again, I stated we have the water supply. Sanitary sewer, I skipped that for a reason, we'll come back to that. Snow storage, I've worked with the city, I understand the snow storage requirements and want to implement that to start. We've been down this path several times and it's hard to get that in the initial layout. So we've really been working with the city on developments to get that in up front. Stormwater generally is taken care of through your typical roadside swales, but in this development layout that we've presented, we're looking to utilize stormwater tracks that'll be owned and maintained by the HOA, so it won't be a burden on the city. Typical street side swales are typically maintained and I guess nourished by the homeowners as well, but in these areas we'll give up property for a reduced street section that won't have that typical street side swale that could be neglected by certain homeowners. Rather, it'll be placed in an area that, you know, you'll have routine maintenance on. Your street sections, we are in full compliance and agreement with the city on the street sections they've examined, and the layout provides, I guess, meets all those conditions. And then the parks and open space, there are no parks, open space slated for this area, but park fees will be collected at the time of building permits. Provisions have been made for erosion controls and geohazards stabilization. So essentially that comes through the design process through temporary erosion sediment control, and then is also incorporated into the full build-out development with landscaping and protection as far as just making sure the liabilities aren't there for the city or the homeowners. Provisions have been made for gas power, telecoms, mailboxes, and similar infrastructure. We will, once we get this layout figured out with the city 100% dialed in, we'll work with the United States Postal Service to address the location of the mailboxes. And then we'll also continue to work with the dry utility providers who want to revisit our initial conversations once we have an approval and we're moving forward. Provisions have been made for driveway locations. One of the, I guess, benefits of looking into this project to start is the fact that you can analyze the best location for driveways. And I know it's probably hard to see and it might be more beneficial for you to look at your hard copy, but we have laid out the driveways for this development as proposed, conceptually proposed, addressing spacing requirements from intersections, just life safety issues as far as proper spacing. And so we're not presenting something to the city that can't actually be built. The area proposed for the subdivision is zoned for the proposed use and the use conforms. So essentially the area, as Donna stated, was annexed with 4 dwelling units per acre. We've come forth tonight requesting a zone change for a portion of the property. However, the property, as Donna stated, will stay within that 4 units per acre. So we're not asking to increase the density. We're not asking for anything outside of what's been identified on the future land use maps and available through the zoning codes. The developers made adequate plans to assure the community will bear no more than their fair share cost to provide services by paying fees, furnish land, or providing other mitigation measures for offsite improvements. And so one of our big items that we discussed a few moments ago was that we're willing to dedicate the necessary right-of-way to accommodate the improvements, but not just dealing with what's on our property, but also dealing with what's on the adjacent properties, i.e. the sanitary sewer lift station is impacting the proposed road for Downing Lane, and then also the access for Mr. McNabb's future development to the west, in that he needs sufficient access to his property, which was being provided by the Dunkirk Lane, which Dunkirk Lane is a reduced street section in front of the Viking Apartments. We're widening that section starting at the west side of Downing Lane. So we're continuing that street section here up to Downing, and then we'll transition on the west side of Downing. Staff recommended subdivision conditions of approval. The developer shall be required to reflect all necessary permanent dedications and or easements on the face of the plat and documents of record. Without reading that full thing, that's a general requirement by the city prior to the document being submitted to the county surveyor for review and approval. So we have no objection to that. All permits from outside agencies shall be obtained prior to construction. We again are required to do so prior to submittal or during the submittal process. and work with the city staff on those items. The approval shall run with the land for a term approved by the conditions of approval, and we have no objection to that. All lots shall be accessed from internal roads. No lot shall have any form of access to Hayden Avenue. We agree with that condition. The construction plan submittal shall include these requirements. Hayden Avenue right-of-way will be designed as a minor arterial. Our portion of that half-width Downing Lane will be identified as a local street collector. Again, we'll design our street sections in accordance with what is required. Dunkirk Avenue right-of-way is identified as a local street collector. So Downing and Dunkirk will essentially have the same improvement section. And then any internal road network will meet the requirements of the city of Hayden. Erosion control measures will be in place. On our plans, we provide a specific plan that can be extracted from the plan set and utilized specifically for erosion control. We feel that helps the contractors in the field maintain those improvements. A letter from the USPS with respect to mailbox locations will be obtained. Again, after we get through a point where we can receive approval, we will seek that letter from the USPS and submit that prior to construction plan approval. Landscape plans will be provided. A note shall be included on the landscape plans, identify the dry grass mix, shall be applied until individual lots constructed. Basically, we want to be in full compliance. That area out there does see blowing dust, and we've all witnessed what can happen in that area during farming activities. And so all that erosion control will be taken care of with temporary seeding as needed. The swales that are being proposed in the project should be owned by the homeowners association. We agree with that. We'll construct those swales and then form the homeowners association. Street frontage improvements along the streets shall be included with the landscape. The design, it's always difficult, and we work really well with the city. It's always difficult to have a large amount of future right-of-way trees placed with no irrigation. And so unless the lots have irrigation, we can work with the city on how that is implemented through time. But basically we want to make sure when we get this approval that it's understood that those street trees in front of those lots without irrigation are just being placed without, and I know the city's really good at working with that, the staff. So road designs, again, shall be in accordance with City of Hayden transportation policies and spacing requirements. Rob and Allen will take a look at that and make sure that we are in full compliance. As identified on the attachments, this condition right here basically is stating that Viking, or I guess Whipple Consulting, who represents the landowners to the west, to the south and to the east, they've created a layout and agree that our proposed configuration for Downing Lane is totally sufficient for their development, and in fact plays really well into their layout. And so they provided written documentation, I think that's in your packet, of support for this proposed development. Sites shall be reviewed under separate permit and are not a part of the subdivision construction plan approval. Basically, the commercial site or the mixed use properties as they are developed will be separate permits, separate submittals that the city will be able to review and condition. No development shall be allowed in the area of the subdivision identified within the H8 sewer basin. This is why I was waiting for this topic, and I'll bring my client up to discuss this. This is the only condition we really have somewhat of a question about or an objection to at this time. But we'll come back to that in just a moment. So the zone change standards of approval. The commission shall consider the existing zoning district or regulations and may recommend approval, conditional approval, modifications, or denial of the proposal, or the commission may defer action until competent studies or plans may be necessary to determine the advisability of the proposal. Staff reviewed the submittal for the zone change. And again, I'm not trying to jump into this, just concurrent, sorry, get through this quickly for you guys. The staff reviewed the entire submittal, both the subdivision submittal and the zone map amendment submittal, and they did not find any additional studies or plans would be required. The city council may impose conditions upon rezoning where such conditions are required to ensure the proposed use of the area are consistent with the community needs and its public health, safety, and general welfare. The property is located in the mixed-use zoning designation as identified in the future land use map. The city staff has recommended the MU2 zoning designation for this area. And again, we're not talking about anything south of that initial existing commercial line. So it's generally about half of what the future land use map is requesting. And the remaining piece will remain this yellow color or single family residential. Amendments to the zoning map and or zone text shall be in accordance with future land use maps. Again, the future land use map identifies the area in question as being mixed use, and the staff has deemed that, again, MU2. Amendments to the zone map and zone text shall align with the zoning district's purpose and intent. The proposed use as conceptually identified on the submitted exhibits is consistent with the zoning district's purpose and intent, and that's why we submitted that conceptual layout for you, not to make you dizzy, just showing the feasibility of the proposed 30 condo single-family units and the commercial facility, more of a central hub, meeting setback requirements, open space requirements, yet still meeting the requirement for common walls. I believe fourplex, Donna, is the minimum for that. And so we are proposing fiveplexes with common wall structures, just essentially conditionally, conceptually showing what could happen on the property. With that said, I want to hand this over to my client, Mr. Scott Kurtz, and let him discuss their request regarding sanitary sewer for this property.
Did you want to open his presentation? Good. Yeah. There you go. Yeah, you did. No help from me.
How do we do it? I think you just, yeah, you can just scroll.
How does it scroll with the?
Yeah, just
Okay,
scroll.
great. Thank you, Donna. Thank you, Scott. I'm going to try and not make myself triple redundant, but it's kind of difficult when you go last. I wanted to thank the City of Hayden and Planning and Zoning for the opportunity to present this project. It's been a long time in the making. We've been working with Donna and some of the crew for the past year. I think we bought this parcel in July of 2021. I haven't met all of you, so maybe it's an opportunity to take a second to introduce myself, my company, and the team. My name is Scott Kurtz. Company is Madison Capital. That's a developer company. I have my partner, Kiefer Norris, who's zoomed in. He couldn't join us. We've been working together on various projects for, I'd say, the past 13 years. We're a relatively small developer. You can see from this project, it's humble, 72 units. We're all locally based. My wife and I, my business, my family are all here in Coeur d'Alene. And as a matter of fact, the whole team, sort of soup to nuts, is a local talent. You all know Scott MacArthur probably too well. But our horizontal developers, Peck and Peck, our builders, LH Homes, which is a multi-generational father-son building team. Our designer has their offices right on Celtice, and our agents are two local guys who are going to control, hopefully, when we get to the end, the sales process of these properties. So we're not a national builder, and we're building within our own community. So we try to be very conscious of what the residents, not only what the city needs to meet its standards, but what the residents need in terms of the aesthetic. And we know Hayden and the Prairie is a bit of a different animal, and there are a lot of various concerns that we're, I think, in touch with given the team that we have. So one of the things has already been addressed, we are not intending to do. It's not our product, it's not our business. We don't want to overdevelop. We're not going for maximum density. We're not going for whatever we could do in future future zone maps. As Scott had already mentioned, the current zone map has, this commercial piece that extends 300 feet south of Hayden Avenue. Under the future zone map, that would allow us to go 600 feet south of Hayden Avenue. And with that extra doubling of that space, bring all that additional density in. We're not trying to maximize rooftop stores or units. So we're, as we said, only looking to kind of do a zone map amendment for this 300-foot south piece. what we're doing with that piece, I mean, I think it's fair if we're asking for a zone change to kind of describe what we're really excited about, and Scott touched upon what we're attempting to build. And I think a lot of it meets a lot of the demand and key considerations in that neighborhood. We said we're going to build one small commercial structure. It's going to be about 4,000 square feet. Ideally, that would be a cafe, a small grocer would be great, a coffee shop, something that, I think our best use or best tenant would be a daily use for the residents. You wake up in the morning, I got to get my cup of coffee, maybe a bite to eat. You're coming home at night, I need to get some, groceries before I go home. Something that really can service. And if you drive that area of Hayden, there's a lot of residences and a lot of doors coming in, but not a lot of stuff that services it. So I think this would be a nice addition and much needed. The other portion, excuse me for a second. What we're actually going to be building, our product, Scott said, is 30 townhomes. We don't want to build big chunky buildings. We want to have an aesthetic. If you sort of look around, and again, we're not reviewing the site plan, but this is kind of what our ideal, one of our ideal goals here, that you have some separation between relatively small buildings, five plexes. You can have landscaping and trees. You can have, good sight lines and just some good spacing. And I think it's, as he said, a good transition from the apartment next door over the commercial. I think it fits. We're trying to make this from Hayden Avenue look like a residential neighborhood. And I think townhomes have a sort of very residential feel, or sort of that quasi-residential feel. And it'll flow well as soon as you cross Dunkirk to go into the single family with some land. One of the big considerations, I mean, this is obviously important. These are not rental units. These are condo townhomes. So residents locally who live here, who want to start a family here, who want an entry-level place, this ideally gives them an opportunity to buy something rather than rent something and build equity over time. Grow with their family, as their family and their wealth hopefully, expands. This is the good place to start. In terms of affordability, our projected price point on this, just because of the efficiencies of building townhomes versus single family and the lack of land, we think it's going to be 20 to 30% less than a comparably sized single family home. So there's obviously no guarantee, especially in this market, what pricing is ultimately going to be down the road. But I would expect this product will be, sub $500,000. And that's a rare creature around here. And I think, again, it gives an opportunity for that starter family to kind of put their foot down within the area. One of the other things that I think we're really excited about, I don't think this product exists, is we're going to build it with this live, work, loft concept. So you have on the ground floor this option to use it as commercial space. So if you're a private contractor, a single member LLC, say you're a tax person, an accountant, a designer, you've got a business where you need, some isolation and you need a professional, place to work, not the, small bedroom at the end of the hall upstairs where you can't get anything done. But, you can optionally use that for commercial space. And it also gives you the opportunity, because there's two entrances, one on one side for potential clients. You can even put a plaque up and have signage. On the other side with the garage is where the family enters in. So you could have a small business, you can operate from home, and you could have clients over. You could have meetings, presentations, pitches. If you work in an industry that you deal with a lot of personal information, you can have a client come in and feel comfortable that they're in a, sort of controlled office environment, but it's right on your ground floor. The benefits to this, I think, are great. For the end buyer, you've got, you buy in an affordable place, you don't have to commute. You're reducing on your traffic flow. You don't have to say, I'm going to work, I've got to drive 30 minutes to Spokane to my office, and you don't have to pay for an office lease as well as a mortgage. It's sort of all in one. It reduces the need for childcare if you've got a small family, you've got one kid, and you can be on site in case of an emergency. So, there's just a lot of aspects to this that we really are excited about and like. We think it's work and family and community friendly. So that's, I probably went into too much detail since we're not going into the site plan. It's just its own change, but that's what the vision is. And we thought we'd, kind of share that up front because we like it. If I can go into the single family, and here I don't want to be too redundant because we've gone over it, but you're looking at 42 single family residential homes in the green space over here, 1,800 to 2,600 square feet per home. You know, we can be flexible as we see this market unfold as to how large we want to build, and again, trying to control for affordability, but that's the range of the product. Obviously going to be a for sale product, so again, residents and buyers can build equity. We think it will be relatively affordable. You know, we're going to meet the, I think it's 8,250 square foot minimum. So it meets the city standard, but it's not a single family residence where you're paying for excessive amounts of land. And we were looking at a project in Rathdrum that was 0.4 acres per lot. You have to pass down that lot premium to a buyer. That buyer has to finance it, and now they're financing at 5.5% instead of 3%. The math doesn't really go so well. So we think this works really well, even in this environment. Scott already addressed all the buildings, the roads and infrastructure we're doing, so I won't get into that. The sort of challenge that we have, and again, you know, I appreciate the city concerns and need for boundaries and delineations and sewer basins, got to begin and end somewhere. But the challenge that we have is this H7 versus H8 sewer line. And I think, you know, we're in a position where we're relatively unique in a number of ways. And one of them is we're the only underdeveloped piece of land that has the H7 and H8 kind of cutting through us. Everything else has already been, in some way or form, developed. So we're the only undeveloped land. This is our little green area here. Here's the this red is the H7. The other thing that's presenting a real challenge for us, and we're just, you know, we want to come to the city and see how we can sort of figure something out because it's an engineering cost and delay challenge. The line doesn't just, you know, if it ran straight through on the commercial and that was H7 and then on bottom it was H8, you could kind of make more sense of it. But what it does is it comes in the side, goes about halfway through, starts going down to the south, and then it juts over again. So we kind of have these two Jenga pieces of land that we're trying to serve. And as Scott knows and Donna knows, you know, trying to put a site map around that is, you know, challenging is an understatement. I think engineering tells us you know, the H7 can serve that entire parcel. It's not like there's a geographic, a physical barrier, topographic challenge that can't be overcome. So it's something that can be done. Just from a practical standpoint, you know, our proximity to the H7 sort of imply, you know, you would think that's the logical place to hook up. This is sort of a rough green outline of our property. Here's the H7, which we're just directly adjacent to the northeast, whereas the H8, you know, obviously yet to be built is you know, much farther out there to the south. It raises for us a lot of cost considerations. Costs generally, as you know, for a builder, they get passed down. You know, if you're trying to build affordable product, the more costs you have up front, the more difficult it is to deliver on the back end. And you know, if we were building 1,000 units and 150 of them fell outside of H7 and we're in H8, I would, that's a large number. I wouldn't even think to come to council and planning and zoning and ask for consideration of this. What we're looking at is a pretty minimal number. We've got 42 proposed single family units, 26 of them fall within the H7 lift station boundary line. And it's just 16 that technically fall within the H8 basin, as they've shown before, kind of outlined here in green and gray. One of the challenges, we've talked to Scott about this, you know, it seems to me unusual, I've never seen it done before, is, you know, we're building this infrastructure, this Downing Lane running north-south. We would have to have right here, stub out the lift, so we carry, you know, south to north to this H7 station, which is, again, you could throw a rock and hit it, it's right there. And then you'd have to have a completely separate lift running north to south to H8, which is kind of way off, you know, down on the corner of the wall over there. It just, again, it presents a lot of challenges, a lot of delays. It's just something we're trying to overcome and want to be able to kind of have the conversation, see if we can work with the city on this. So those are sort of our concerns. We spent a lot of time, though, reviewing and doing our own analysis of the master sewer plan, the current and future land use. to see how, if we were the city, how we could view this, particularly, are we trying to ask for more capacity and allocation than we deserve, or than we should get? And we've come to the conclusion with this analysis that, even with the inclusion of the 16 single-family residential units, this Madison Ranch plan leaves sewer capacity unutilized. We went through a couple of scenarios. One is, scenario one is, going for the most usage, the most density, future land use. And scenario three is our actual proposal. So in scenario one, under future land use, that mixed use could go 600 feet south of Hayden, which we're not asking for. And the remainder of the parcel could be mixed residential. In that scenario, the total allocation of single-family residential units would be 122 units within the H7. Our proposed development is 72 units, so this means we're only 59% of that total allocation, that hypothetical, but going for the extreme density. I'll skip number two, but probably the more relevant is what we're actually requesting, which is scenario three. We keep it at 300 feet, change it to mixed-use commercial off of Hayden Avenue, and leave the balance of it as single-family residential, all low density, all less than 4 per acre. Under that scenario, our calculation of the total allocated single-family units within H7 is 75 units. And again, we're only, if we include the 16 units that fall in H8, we're only 72 units. So we're still only 95% of that allocation. So our conclusion is we're not asking to put any additional burden on the H7 station. It's just trying to relieve the sort of the mess and the nightmare and cost and delay of building out these lift stations if it's unnecessary. We have a couple of tables. I won't go through unless you want to, but one of the things we also noted is the calculations we're using are based on 172 gallons, which is the city allocation. And I think in one of the meetings or somewhere we'd seen that actual city usage is only 136. So again, we're kind of under the allocation in terms of 75 versus 72. And if you actually look at actual usage, there's again, not a burden, excessive burden on H7. We're actually kind of gives the city an opportunity to lock into a low density, low usage site plan. So, again, we fully appreciate and respect the concerns of the city. We want to address them. We're trying our best to analyze them. This is our first build in Hayden, so a little bit of this is kind of getting an understanding and trying to be a good partner and understand what the city's concerns are. But we do think that we have, a good case given our low density, our underutilization of capacity, proximity to H7, the engineering and cost aspects, and the fact that we're the only underdeveloped lot with a unique boundary line. I don't think we're setting precedent. I think we're just trying to see if we can take a common sense approach and understand what, if anything, we could do to try and move this forward. So I thank you for your time and forward to questions.
Do any of the commissioners have questions for the presenters today? Keith?
I have one real quick.
Sean?
You said this is the only undeveloped lot with, or undeveloped parcel within the H7 sewer state boundaries?
The
It's
shared,
been developed, so we kind of know the use, is that correct, or?
I think what he said, it's the only undeveloped that has a split between
That has a split.
H7 and H8.
I mean, technically, you could, the Viking has a split, but they've developed. And the rest are either not split or, or developed in some way.
large density in this area with the apartments on their parcel. And this property, that wasn't the intent of Madison to come in and try to mimic that development along Hayden Avenue. We know that's not what the city wants.
No.
And so that's why we're trying to stay in that same understanding there. But yeah, this property right here owned by Mr. McNabb is entirely in the H7 station under the commercial zoning. And so he has no concerns. But this property, essentially right in this area, follows the line and then traverses across, straight across. So.
Brandon, you have any questions?
No, I'm good.
And Keith, you're good? Good. Okay, thank you.
Just a couple quick things that I wanted to bring up too that I didn't get back to mention. The lot sizes in the proposed development. as Scott mentioned, the minimum is 8,250 square feet. We have lot sizes in this 42 lot development that are 19,000 square feet down to 8,457 square feet. So they kind of range, just trying to spread out the lot size, more desirable lot. And again, as Scott mentioned, that comes at a cost to the developer too, because now they're losing density on that property potentially. And they are giving up additional land that could have otherwise been additional lots. That 19,000 square foot could have been 2 lots. Had they spread this out, it would have been a complete different configuration. No additional questions?
But this is conceptual, it could
Correct.
change.
Correct, yeah. This is just to get the idea. Really, the design was based around that line, this separation line of H7. This is the H7 line to the north and to the west of this line. And so all the lots in white would fall in that H7 basin, and then all the grayed out lots here would be a future phase. You know, if a sewer tech memo is not approved as a part of our request, these lots would fall in the H8 basin, which unfortunately, as Scott mentioned, here's the H7 lift station. The H8 is further south here, and they would have to wait to develop those 16 lots until such time as Viking built phase after phase after phase. The owner of this property, Hayden Homes, excuse me, built phase after phase after phase and extended that infrastructure up. So you would essentially, our clients would build a portion of this road and they wouldn't be able to provide access because they wouldn't have the sewer infrastructure in that road to someday connect to this property to the south. So we're kind of at a traffic jam right now with streets and sewer.
Any other questions, Keith? All right, thanks, Scott.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, it's way too quiet in here. So, if there were public here, I would talk to them, but at a public hearing, we give out flow charts that kind of give the process for a public hearing. And on the back side of those flow charts are the standards of approval. So if everybody could pull theirs out and look at the standards of approval for zone map amendment, we're gonna go through those in summary, because Scott did a really good job reading them to you, so I'm not going to do that again, but we'll just kind of summarize the staff review and noticing. So for PZE 220046, that's the zone map amendment. Based on the applicant's proposal, staff does not believe additional studies or plans are necessary. Mixed-use designs for a mixed-use site, it really are dependent on the actual use that comes in at the time of the site. So at the time of the site, it'll follow the site plan, and a trip generation letter will be provided based on the uses that are proposed, and staff will evaluate that. And if that needs additional transportation study at that point in time, then we'll have the applicant do that, but not as a part of this proposal, because again, we don't know what that use really is. Above and beyond the part that's partially multifamily, we don't know what the commercial component is. Should the mixed use zone be approved, as we've said two or three times, it is in the mixed use 2 subcategory, and therefore a zoning development agreement shall be recommended.
So can I interrupt you for a second? What do you see that
development agreement looking like?
We've got some suggestions coming in in here later, because
And I'll be patient.
yeah, it's all good. The third requirement talks about the future land use map, goals and policies of the comp plan. The mixed use area allows for both that residential multifamily of 3 or more structures or units per structure based on the comprehensive plan definition, as well as commercial land use types, wanting to create that, again, that flexible environment for development with fewer restrictions on structure and types and densities. In your staff review, on page 5 of your staff review, and then in the appendix of the zone map amendment, page 5 kind of pulled out those that kind of applied to this, going from a commercial only use to a residential multifamily use, kind of the goals and policies that address those. And then all of the goals and policies that are in the comprehensive plan are found in the back of your staff review. Some people might have a different goal or policy that they think fits more appropriately than the ones that I pulled, not infallible. But ones that pretty much kind of follow the process are that you want to provide a balance of commercial uses in designated areas throughout the community centered around established transportation corridors while protecting the character of adjacent land uses. Hayden Avenue is an established transportation corridor. It's been there for a long time. Want to ensure that ordinances and policies don't violate private property rights or adversely impact property values or create unnecessary limitations on land uses. Want to promote and encourage the development and rehabilitation of quality housing through a variety of housing options and densities. Encourage rezoning and zone text amendments to support the creation of strategic nodes or higher density development and transition zones between residential and industrial uses. And although these aren't all industrial, there are commercially that fall in that category a bit. And development should be compatible with the land use chapter of the comprehensive plan and fiscally responsible in supplying adequate transportation, utilities, and parks to newly developed areas. And that's kind of a snapshot of many of those goals and policies that were listed on page 5. And whether or not the zone map amendment shall align with the zone district. So the zone district for commercial, as it stands today, provides for most types of businesses, especially retail and wholesale sales and service. Mixed use, remember when we went through the changes and pulled out only certain kinds of commercial uses that the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council felt were more applicable, less conflict-oriented between a residential use and a commercial use. Those are the commercial uses that are allowed in mixed use. So the mixed use zone provides for both residential multifamily of 4 units or more per structure and commercial land use types, creating that flexible environments for either one or the other or both. So commercial in the mixed use is only a subset of the commercial that's allowed in commercial. Setbacks and lot coverage, the table is shown on page 7 of your staff review. Everything is the same as far as all the setbacks, land coverages, not able to have an accessory dwelling unit. All of those are the same except for a couple of cases where the mixed use is only multifamily, which is not the case here because this is both commercial and multifamily. But if you had mixed use where it's only allowed to be multifamily, then the rear yard setbacks, let's see, maximum lot coverage, except the lot coverage maximum. That's what I was going to talk about. Lot coverage maximum. So commercial doesn't have a lot coverage maximum. Commercial only in the mixed use doesn't have a lot coverage maximum. Commercial and multifamily together don't have a lot coverage maximum. But if you only have multifamily on that lot, then you can only have 70% of the lot covered with structures. Those are carports, garages, buildings. In this case, the request is for commercial and multifamily, so that lot coverage doesn't hit, but that is a quirk. Rear yard setbacks do apply. Rear yard setbacks for commercial and mixed use with only commercial in them are that 10-foot minimum, or you can go all the way down to a 0 foot if you meet fire and building code requirements. But whenever you introduce multifamily into the conversation in mixed use, your setback automatically increases to what it would be if you were actually in more residential use. And so it's 20 feet from your rear yard. And then any third story in a building, if it were to be constructed, has a setback as well, so that it's 45 feet from that rear yard, from any residential zone. So that rear yard in these cases. The mixed use talks about density allowances, and their base density is 12 units per acre, but this is 4 units per acre as the cap, so it doesn't even hit that threshold. And then the zone map goes on to talk about infrastructure requirements at the time of development, and we'll talk about those more in depth with the subdivision. So notices were sent to 22 agencies, and we did a double notice, so they got to see both the zone map amendment request and the subdivision request, so they could kind of see how they work together. And we actually had we had the same in some cases and different in other cases. So the Coeur d'Alene Airport had no comments, but they requested a navigation easement. Waste Management had no objections, and they provided container enclosure specifications to consider at the time of development. TEQ provided general comments that could be applied at the time of a specific project. Harbs had no comments. Hayden Lake Irrigation District said that the project had their full support of both the proposed amendments here as well as the subdivision. And Northern Lakes Fire Protection District had comments related to the project's future at the time of development. And all of those comments were in your staff review. So should you choose to approve the zone map amendment from commercial to mixed use, you also need to kind of look at what you want, potentially what you may want to include in the zoning development agreement, what you want it to address. So these are truly suggestions. The concern is that the site plan is conceptual. It's exceedingly conceptual. And partially because, you have to kind of figure out how this all works together, number one. And number two, as the project kind of morphs back and forth, the requirement is 10% of the ground floor area of the buildings on the site go toward commercial. So that's going to kind of push and shove the size of the commercial and potentially the use of the commercial and the required parking for the commercial, as well as push and shove the stormwater requirements for the circulation and the potentially the number of units that they would actually be able to construct on the site. So I would caution you into not making any conditions on the zoning development agreement that would push them into, yeah, go ahead and have mixed use, but there's no way to really develop to their, that process. So I tried to give you just some really general kind of ideas. They're strictly ideas, and the Planning and Zoning Commission can come up with better ones, I'm sure. But part of the zoning development agreement could memorialize the fact that they need to meet the requirements of the mixed use design standards that, exist at the time of development. You could have some general development conditions related to compliance with the density requirements, either in the annexation agreement or the underlying zone, again, at the time of development. And I'm sure that if you're looking for better ideas, that Fonda could probably help out with those as well. So
I'm taking notes for you.
Okay, good. I just don't like to see conditions in a zoning development agreement that make development of the site really hard for everybody. I think that's probably where I'm going with that. So, did that answer your question?
Yeah, and it just led to another one, but yeah.
Okay, do you want to ask now?
Okay, so how do we come up with the 10% use of commercial when there's really no way to predict, unless they have a crystal ball I'm not aware of, and then I have a few more questions for them, how many of those condo units will actually use that ground floor for commercial? And then how do they possibly accommodate for parking for said ground floor commercial use?
Okay, I think we might have to hold off and wait for their rebuttal.
Okay,
Good question.
right.
So Donna, regarding the zone development agreement, I mean, normally those are done up with parameters from city council and worked out with city staff. So I'm glad you're putting the thought into our head, but my thoughts are to leave it open at our level.
Unless you've got any that you specifically want to include in your findings. I don't
Right.
want you to not think that you don't have an opportunity to include those as part of this finding.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. All right, so the subdivision request is for a 42-lot, single-family residential subdivision. There was a typo in the staff review. It said 40. It should have said 42. My error. Sorry about that. And one lot to be developed mixed use, if approved, or commercial, if not approved. So again, dig out your flow chart for subdivisions. Did you guys get flow charts?
They can have mine. I know what they say.
He's sharing. So working through those standards of approval, the first two are related to, how it's constructed to promote public health, safety, and welfare. The second one talks about construction and located in an orderly manner that accommodates ongoing maintenance needs and co-location of other infrastructure. And that's pretty much addressed in number 3 in those standards of approval coming up. So the infrastructure is or will be in compliance with applicable city, state, and federal policies and regulations. So we will serve letters from Hayden Lake Irrigation District on June 30th and from the city of Hayden on May 18th. Northern Lakes Fire Protection District provided comments for construction on May 19th. The project site is split in the sewer master plan between the H7 sewer basin and the H8 sewer basin. And the applicant, as they've said, we've been back and forth with them for a while about the H7, H8 conversation, and they did request a possibility to have a sewer tech memo put together to evaluate the possibility of migrating those lots that are in the H8 basin into the H7 basin. And staff had identified that the sewer master plan was put together for reasons and that it didn't, anyway, staff evaluated it and decided that it didn't make sense for the city to migrate those lots into the H7 basin. And hence why the condition was identified that those properties that were in the H8 basin would need to be part of the H8 basin, could not develop until such time as the H8 basin was constructed and built and that infrastructure was put in place. Hence the request that you've heard from the applicant to allow for a sewer tech memo at their cost to be evaluated to see if it could be actually migrating those lots into the H7 basin. even if a tech memo is done, it doesn't automatically mean that city council would approve the tech memo and allow for that to happen, which is part of the reason that we didn't move forward at this point with a sewer tech memo.
And the sewer tech memo effectively amends the sewer master plan. So your sewer master plan right now identifies exactly where these basins are defined. And so the request for the sewer tech memo essentially amends that sewer master plan and does need to be approved by city council.
And that just goes to city council, not to us, correct?
Correct.
We would just have to put a condition that, in our approval, that
To
allows the sewer tech memo to be done.
to have a sewer tech memo evaluate the appropriateness of the applicant's request.
So
And it appears from their materials, I'm sorry, but that they have offered to pay for that evaluation, if I read that correctly.
And then the city council is under no obligation to accept the findings. They can keep it how it is, but at least they have all the information they need.
Correct.
So for Rob, or maybe Alan, I know that planning is essential, sometimes plans are worthless, and if that's meant in humor, of course. Does 16 units significantly burden H7? Is that the analysis of the city, or is it just more that we've laid out these plans and so we should stick to them?
I think the reason that staff originally said that we didn't see a path forward in changing the master plan is that the current lift station, which H7 is our newest lift station, is only a couple of years old. You heard maybe a statement that there's plenty of capacity there. There is capacity there today. If we were to build out close to our master plan, which we don't ever plan our master plan to build out at 100%. So like if they're building at 4 residential units per acre, our master plan only builds that land at 3. So it already has because we know that they might be doing 4, but somebody else might be doing 2.7 or something, right? So nobody ever builds out. So our master plan is not designed to build the sewer to the ultimate capacity of every acre it's somewhere in between, sometimes on 60% or some balance, right? Right now, the H7 sewer basin, which is where they want to take those deals, has a capacity of 500 gallons per minute. If the basin actually builds out per the comp plan, not per the current zoning, per the comp plan, we will need to have 790 gallons per minute, substantial more flow into that lift station at a substantial cost. And so the city is I know they're saying there's unique, that's a question somebody can decide. Viking right next door is really about the same thing, other than they've got some apartments already built, right? They're not going to be unique here really shortly. It'll be pretty much the same thing. We also have land to the east that if that line was moved, that would also, otherwise we'd be putting sewer on 2 sides of a road. One going one way, one going the other way. So in looking at it, you're taking a master planned facility that's already in trouble capacity-wise and adding to it. And then we're also going to have, I can almost assure you this same question is going to come up with subdivision to the west. And then if it's also there, it will be to the land as it develops. I mean, the subdivision to the east, and then also probably continuing east. We would almost have to continue it east if we did that and so then this lift station becomes basically almost obsolete the day it was put in the ground. And that is the reason staff kind of said, it doesn't really make sense to us to add to that capacity at this time, and we didn't feel there was a really value in going through that process.
So it's not a matter of whether the 16 units would or wouldn't significantly burden H7, it's more the precedent and the potential if the land is developed.
It is. I don't know that, if we do it at 16 units per time, every time I could say that's not significant, right? If every time it came in, somebody said, oh, it's just two residential units, but if that happens 17 times, and that's now, you know, X number of units instead of, so that's kind of, and so it's a capacity issue, not a geographical issue. That pretty.
But the request by the applicant for JUB to look at that just recently came in, and JUB has not evaluated it, correct?
Correct. It's my understanding that
There's been no evaluation
on the 11th of July, and we've just kind of just like barely skimmed it, Alan and I.
But I do know the flows of that lift station and what projection is that it will be. And that's it's already 157% probably below what it needs to be. So this is just adding to that, and those costs, I don't know how when we looked at it, I don't know how you'd mitigate that cost, which means it becomes a city cost down the road. So we're adding to the cost of what has to be paid for by the citizens to add that capacity, is the way I looked at it.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
You bet.
So, Alan, if, I want to be careful how I word this. Say these guys decided they wanted to be jerks and play by our rules and use our rules against us and go for the density that they're allowed to by law, which would exceed what they're asking for in their exception.
I don't know if that's true. That's not my area of expertise.
Is there a way that we can verify that? I mean,
Could they overdevelop the H7 and put more?
I'm just saying, they're allowed to develop as dense as they're allowed to develop. And according to their claims, they could develop more units in the area they're allowed in H7 and overwhelm that even more. They're allowed to do that.
They'd only be allowed to do that if they got an annexation agreement amendment and a zone map amendment.
Yeah, all the larger lots were in the H8 part of the map, if I recall.
I'm just saying, leave the H8 out. Let's not even talk about the H8. If they just develop the H7 to the maximum amount that they're already allowed, they would have more units and more sewer capacity. And so it seems to me like the point that they made was that they were going to develop less than what they're allowed in the H7 and spread it out across the whole of the property.
But that's contingent on us approving the zone map amendment, because right now it's mapped as commercial and R1.
I think they are tied to 4 residential units per acre.
Under their annexation
So they would have to come in for an annexation agreement amendment, which would also bring into account the fact of the sewer capacity as part of that decision. So I don't know that that's a possibility. I mean, that would be brought before you as another decision to make at that point, and you'd have to make that decision at that time to allow them to increase that, knowing that it also would create an impact on that facility.
So,
am I
direct a question to?
Well, they'll rebut
Yeah.
after the city's
Right.
done their presentation, then we can ask them.
Okay. Okay.
But they are under obligation to follow the annexation agreement of 72 units maximum.
4 units per acre maximum, yep.
But Alan,
That's spread out over the whole thing. It doesn't matter if they do 30 units and 5 acres and 42 units on the remaining. Yeah, okay.
is there a mechanism in place, Alan, that they could pay for the H7 lift station to be improved? To meet this? I mean, would it be cheaper for them to improve the H7 than forego development of the H8?
Probably the cost of expanding that. So here's the deal, right? To expand that, I don't know how you could do it for probably less than $500,000 or something. You have to, the overflow basin needs to be expanded, which is 35 feet in the ground. The The pumps might be able to be expanded, I don't know. It's not a simple task, and it's not going to be simple for the city in the future when we get even there if we have to, right? We don't know where this is going, but I don't know how, that was kind of the deal when we talked about it, right? It's like, okay, if they could mitigate it, what would that look like? And we're going, we just don't even know how that's done at a cost effective. You could say, well, it would cost, $1 million to expand it, but there are only 16 of that, but that doesn't really work, right? And because somebody else has to pay that other part, and it has to happen at some point. And so this, so the city puts $5,000 in a bank someplace and it costs them $500,000 down the road to deal with it. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how you quantify it, right? I mean, I'm not saying there isn't a way.
I was just asking if there was a mechanism in place for them to be able to fund that, but it doesn't, it sounds like maybe there is, but it would almost need a study itself.
And it would be I think it would be a substantial study because we're not just talking 16. So if we're gonna let 16 go in, we're gonna get multiple requests for others. And it's like, what is the total scope of the revision to the sewer basin boundary? And yeah, it's a tough one.
That work would be less expensive now while it's mostly plains and farmland, as opposed to now there's a million homes there and streets that you gotta dig up and everything, or no?
It would be, the property the city owns will require probably what I would call what you would commonly call shoring to do. So you would have to pre-shore it with some type of shoring structure to get down to be able to do those improvements. And that's why it becomes difficult. If you were able to reach an agreement with adjacent landowners and but we'd be tearing up an existing facility that has to stay in operation in order to do that, right? So, I mean, looking at it long-term, I think we're looking at some point, figuring out how to change how this happens in order to accommodate, because I think it's going to be difficult, and I don't have that. We're so far from, it's kind of an awkward situation when you say there's a ton of capacity there today, and there is a ton of capacity there today, but there won't be in short order when those the area that's in the basin gets developed, right? So there's a large chunk of land across the street that's just prime. There's the Viking property that's huge. There's the Atlas industrial tracts. There's, all those are going into this structure.
So I have two questions if I can. In the same line. So I'll just put out both questions. You can pick and choose. How do we build a facility that when we're still looking at vacant ground, we can make the statement that it's under capacity? Why wasn't it built? And I know nothing about sewers and stuff, so you just have to know that my question's coming from a place of ignorance, and I'm not trying to be adversarial. I'm hearing that, I'm going, I don't understand this.
So there's a couple things that we learned. Okay, and these are, we were building under the old master plan that had rules that, I don't know.
To clarify that, please, the H7 lift station was installed under the previous master plan.
It was. So one of the things that really brought this to light, and is one of the reasons that when they were looking at the new comprehensive plan and the zoning, was because we had our high density in our commercial zone through a special use permit. what that did was commercial is not a high density for capacity, for sewer capacity.
Right.
High density residential is a high capacity for sewer. And so you had the potential from looking at it from hardly any flow to a large amount of flow. So
Depending on what the landowner did with the land.
depending on how the land use got developed. And one of the situations that took place there is the Carrington Apartments. So that capacity was never intended, was never looked at as being all up fronted and right in the H7 basin, right? So that's how stuff like that happens, right? Now, the other side of that is we could have down the road something else that developed at a lower than anticipated density, which could offset that. We just don't know that today, right? I mean, there's just so many variables, so.
So my second question, thank you. So my second question is, I feel like we're kind of in a, what comes first, the chicken or the egg situation with this development, because, and some people might say that's a good thing. That's not me. Because of the first to the table, I'm looking at what they're asking for. And so if they have to live with the split, and they not only don't want to build those 16 until H8, they can't build that base, if I'm understanding correctly, until H8 is built. Is that correct?
They would not be able to develop those
Okay.
until there was a place to take the sewer, which is H8 basin.
And how do we get H8 when no other, again, make sure I'm understanding clearly, no other development can develop without the roads that go through that make those available because they can't enter from other places?
I'll take that one. So H8 can be constructed,
Okay.
and their portion of H8 is at the upper end of the basin.
Okay.
So H8 can develop. The H8 sewer basin can be developed without their land.
What would kick H8 off to being built?
Developer interest down there.
Well, we already have some developer interest, so what other
We
developer
have,
interest?
we have one. We have Viking to the east.
Okay.
That's two. And you look at the other properties, there is interest there. So it's, in my opinion, it's a matter of those developers getting together and building a lift station and a force main. Part of the force main's already built. So it's.
So what role does the city have in that? Or does the city have any role in that, in H8 being built?
Probably the planning portion, so. And to be fair, that this is, I see the chicken and egg situation, how they were well aware of the basin line before they got to this point. And the basin line was held on purpose because of the capacity. It was, because we knew that moving it was going to be a big burden on the city, so to try to eliminate that. The developer just directly east will have the exact same deal. They will only be able to bring in, they've already got their apartments in. They're only going to be able to bring in a small percentage of additional before they would have to. They're going to be in the same situation that these are in. So I think I can't speak because we don't know what the market is. We don't know what the market's going to happen, but I don't think that driving force is that far truly away.
Okay.
Unless we decide to kick that can down the road, which is a council decision, which would be to move forward with a study and say, we're going to let them in and then we'll figure out how to do with the capacity later. And that will be a difficult decision, I think. That's the situation we're in H6 today, where we kicked the can down the road and now we're in a difficult spot.
Should I continue? All right, so stormwater, and Scott identified stormwater tracks as being joint stormwater tracks, and then snow storage, again, shall be reviewed at the time of construction plan review in accordance with Title 8. Street names and addressing shall be reviewed by the city at the time of final plat. Street names, the city has a policy that doesn't allow any duplication of street names with any other street name that's in Kootenai County. And most of that is because of our emergency responders. We share borders, we share responders that respond to multiple jurisdictions, and we like people to be saved as much as possible. Hayden Avenue shall be constructed, the half width on the south side shall be constructed to the half width of an A1 typical section. Downing Lane and Dunkirk Avenue shall be constructed to a C1 typical section. Internal public streets shall be built to that ST 111 and 111A typical section. It's important to note that all required street improvements also shall be built to the current city standard drawings, and those include pedestrian ramps, sidewalks, stormwater facilities, etc. So it's more than just the pavement. Geohazards, as Scott noted, shall be reviewed during construction plan review because although the prairie looks flat, it is not. No parcels shall have access, primary or secondary, to Hayden Avenue. Mailbox location shall be located on internal public streets. Sometimes they require turnouts, and so turnout easements and pullouts should be a part of what the construction plans will be reviewed as. Number 7 talks about zoning and is it appropriate to the zoning designation. And so the R1 is a zone that was established to protect stable neighborhoods of single-family dwellings on smaller lots. And commercial is for most types of businesses that retail and wholesale sales and service. And the proposed zone is for both residential, multifamily, and commercial land use types, creating that flexible environment for either one or the other or both. The setback tables are on pages 7 and 8 of your staff reviews. And I sound like I'm echoing really bad. I can't quite figure out where to move. So these are those setback tables that we've kind of talked about, kind of back and forth. These are the residential setbacks for primary structures and accessory structures. And then this is the setback table for commercial versus mixed use. That mixed use that is the request falls in this one where it's commercial and multifamily. So it's got a 20-foot rear yard setback, and then that height for that third story is 45 feet back. Doesn't have a maximum lot coverage, doesn't have a minimum lot size, so the townhome plat doesn't have a minimum lot size for those townhomes. Minimum street frontage of the original lot is 30 feet. You've got that whole stretch across Hayden Avenue that meets that minimum street frontage requirement, and ADUs are not allowed in mixed use nor in commercial.
Before you go off of that table there, when it's the 45 foot, I understand that when it's abutting like a 1-story house or even a 2-story house, but where this is, the 3 stories are all separated, does that become a non-issue? Mm-hmm. Okay.
If they had yeah, it does in this case.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So your goals and policies of the comprehensive plan are on page 10 of your staff review. Kind of a recap of those is to encourage development within the city prior to the area to be annexed. You want to create that balanced mix of land uses, densities, and housing types. You want to promote greater choices and opportunities. Establish a balance between jobs and housing to attract new employment and living opportunities. Again, you want to coordinate that timely development of efficient, effective, and environmentally sound sewer, water, and other utility infrastructure, servicing the community, assuring that costs of the development are shared equitably and accommodate for ongoing growth. And you want to encourage small-scale retail activity, those restaurants and other service businesses, as well as attract a live, work, play lifestyle through a, mixture of commercial and residential uses. And then the 8th standard talks about not bearing any more than their fair share of the costs. And so all on-site and off-site improvements shall be required of the developer. Extension of infrastructure per the adopted city code standards and plans, and mitigating improvements as required. So again, we sent those to 22 agencies. The Coeur d'Alene Airport responded with no comment, but requested the navigation easement. Waste Management provided those comments for container enclosures. DEQ responded with their general comments. It's about a 4 to 6 page letter, a lot of stuff in there. Hayden Area Regional Sewer Board responded with no comments or objections. Hayden Lake Irrigation responded with full support. Northern Lakes Fire Protection District responded with comments regarding requirements at the time of construction. Idaho Department of Lands responded with no comments. Fish and Game had some recommendations related to the open space areas for planting of native vegetation, both for pollinators and for birds. And the Kootenai County Community Development Department responded with no comments. I did have one public comment that I apologize for not getting attached to the memo that went out, but I think you guys all got tonight, from Tom McNabb. And he said that this project would be great for the area and would support the development of our property in the immediate west along Hayden and Hutter. Beyond that, we received no additional public comments. And then the staff recommended conditions of approval, I believe, start on page 12 of your staff review. And they're summarized here. Dedications and easements on the plat, joint stormwater requirement, easements, maintenance, et cetera. All of that should show up on the face of the plat. Permits from outside agencies, and I list Coeur d'Alene Airport on here. It was kind of the et cetera that landed in the middle of dedications and easements because you're going to grant the navigation easement. It fits kind of up there. Just want to make sure that everybody recognizes you have to go to the airport to make that happen. So we give you the form, the template, take it to the airport, they record it, and you put the record number and the instrument number and the date that it was recorded on the plat. So it's not a city function, we just kind of help facilitate that. It truly happens with the airport. Approvals for the subdivision run with the land, no matter the ownership changes, it runs with the land. Again, no lot shall have access to West Hayden Avenue. We're very protective of our arterials and we try to eliminate any conflict points. We follow the transportation policies regarding access standards and intersections. And all final locations of all addressable structures shall be approved by the city. Construction plan submittals need to include your typical sections for Hayden Avenue, Downing, Dunkirk, and the internal streets. Those erosion control measures that we talked about. It's requirement of the developer to use Hayden sanitary sewer. Concurrence from the U.S. Postal Service regarding those mailbox locations, because sometimes they think they should go someplace and we'd say, it doesn't work so well. Dry grass mix shall be applied until individual lots are constructed and installation of landscaping requirements are met, especially out on the prairie. They dry out really fast and you get a lot of dust blowing and that makes nobody happy, including the airport sometimes. Swale construction, irrigation, and maintenance. So swales that are joint swales that are part of the whole subdivision are constructed as part of the construction of the subdivision and part of the inspections that occur. Those have to be built at that point in time, irrigated with the grass actually working. Whereas swale construction in front of individual lots happens at the time of building permit, and those trees are planted at the time of building permit because, as Scott said, we kind of like to have them irrigated by the homeowner and have them survive. Again, intersection spacing is a minimum of 250 feet for local access streets, so there might be some minor modifications to the road layout, and we would consider those to be minor in nature and wouldn't come back for reapproval. And then an agreement shall be entered into and recorded between the property owners to address those connections of the roadways that we talked about previously, as long as they're in substantial conformance with 2040 strategic transportation plans and the adopted policies. I don't know why that says sanitary sewer oversizing mitigation, but I think it's left over from a previous PowerPoint. I was madly working on it this afternoon, so I apologize for that. The site shall be reviewed under that site plan to the north, that commercial or mixed-use site shall be reviewed under a separate permit and not a part of the subdivision construction plan approvals. Sometimes when subdivisions have parks in them, we review the park plan at the same time that we're doing the subdivision because they're building the park at the same time as the subdivision. In this case, it's a completely separate animal. And no development shall be allowed in the area of the subdivision identified within the H8 sewer basin until the lift station and associated infrastructure has been constructed and approved by the city of Hayden. So that just leads me to the two kind of decisions, and I'm just going to kind of roll those around, and then you can move to the public comment period. I don't know if there's anybody on the phone that may want to participate with that. And so the Planning and Zoning Commission has findings and recommendations related to the zone map amendment. You can recommend approval with conditions or denial of the zone map amendment. You can't just recommend approval because, again, this is a zone map request to mixed use, and this is in a mixed use 2 area, and that, by their request for multifamily, requires a condition. So there has to be an approval with conditions if you're going to approve it, or a denial. And if the Planning and Zoning Commission recommends approval with conditions, then the recommendation conditions could be, and if the commission has ones they want to include in that zoning development, this is where you would recommend those to be. And then the second finding, so those are completely separate. You do the first one first because you can't get to the subdivision until you got the first one figured out. And then the subdivision one is that the Planning and Zoning Commission may recommend approval with the staff recommended conditions of approval as they stand. Or you can do approval with conditions, and you can amend those conditions that exist on the staff recommended conditions in page 12 of your staff reviews. You can add another condition, you could delete conditions, or you can modify the already existing conditions. You could choose to deny the request for a preliminary plat. You could choose to table the request for further information or study or whatever, so a tech memo or whatever that is. So those are kind of your two choices. You got to kind of figure out a path forward. Fauna, do you have is that okay? Yeah. So I stand for questions. We all do. Kind of a staff review conversation.
Question?
Okay.
Refresh me, MU1 can only be developed if 100 bypass goes in, MU2 can be developed now.
No, MU2 is the one that can only be, it can be, MU2 can be developed with commercial. It's a long header, and it can be developed with commercial if you just get an outright mixed use, and MU2, it's limited to commercial. If you want to do multifamily on that piece, then you have to do it under a planned unit development, which they're not proposing, or under a zoning development agreement at the time of the zone map request. They're requesting it under a zoning development agreement. Good question.
Any other questions for Donna? Brandon, you still with us?
Really?
Still here.
Super.
Is there anybody else out there that?
No, I was going to suggest, let's take a few minute break before we move on to public hearing and then the applicant rebuttal. That way we can stretch for, so let's try to stick for 5 minutes or less. Thank you.
Open the public hearing and just make a note on the record that we have nobody who wishes to speak.
Right.
And then confirm there's nobody online.
Right, that's what I want to do before, in other words, do I have to read the whole spiel before I do that? That's what I was trying to avoid. All right, so we're going to open the public hearing procedure. Thank you. What's that? Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Waiting for Mary. All right, we're waiting still, I apologize.
I'm good until you stop chewing.
Okay, now we'll reopen the public hearing procedures. We have no one in the audience. Is there anyone online that wants to provide testimony? Okay, I'm hearing not, so therefore I'll close the public hearing procedures. And now we can move on to the rebuttal. When you guys
Normally, they would be rebutting public comment, but since there wasn't any public comment, it is appropriate to have them rebut anything that they've heard from city staff and answer any further questions.
I was just about to say that. So, yeah, the purpose of the rebuttal is to offer anything you want to say that has to do with what's been said by the city or anyone else. You're not really supposed to introduce any new evidence or new testimony.
Okay. Scott MacArthur Engineering. I wanted to speak to the question about the design for commercial residential. That's sort of a situation, I guess, that we work out with staff. There's design standards that have to be met for that, specifically to commercial and residential. And in my opinion, unless staff has anything to correct that, it would be a design situation that we'd work out the parking capacity, the matrix, the stormwater situation, the open space, the access, all of those features get worked out in that. We're just looking tonight for an approval of a number of units in that mixed area, and then the design constraints will come around that. So hopefully that clears that up.
It does, thank you.
So, and again, we've hit on this a lot, the sewer memo, tech memo request. I know I've been down this path. I've taken the direction from the staff and I've taken the direction from my clients. And I think just not to add, it's not adding anything additional, and I'll let my client Kiefer Norris speak to it in just a moment, but table 1 of the 2020 sewer collection master plan sewer flow generation assumption is just a table there, and it talks about commercial, mixed use, mixed residential, and single family, and that's where my client's analysis using, go to that presentation real fast. Sorry, did I almost close it?
No, don't close it. I'd be down.
I can hear him talking behind me, laughing at me. So looking at the sewer analysis, and I know this is going to be new to you, so just looking at the sewer analysis, basically it's stating that the table 1 of the sanitary sewer collection master plan sewer flow generation assumption states that mixed use is analyzed at 13.6 units per acre, mixed residential 7, and single family residential at 3. And then it goes on to look at commercial as 5.2 units per acre, and then it describes what those items are. And so the analysis that we used, similar to probably the same analysis that Viking used next door, where they took 144 apartments and put them all up on Hayden, we're looking for 72 units over our entire 18 acres to go to the same basin. And so using our analysis, we're well under the capacity that could, as you stated, otherwise be requested for the property, or maybe even that was analyzed. According to this analysis, that's what was used to analyze the property, was the 13.6 units per acre for mixed use and the 7 units per acre for mixed residential. So, and I don't know how, I guess, do we bring staff in for that discussion? I think, and Kiefer, you're on the phone, correct, right now? And he could speak to it from his analysis, being that he has he's been studying this quite a bit. I even had to bring it to my attention where I'm telling him, no, this is what staff is telling us. He's saying, no, this is what we're seeing. We're just not seeing the connection. And so, especially when we look at how Vikings units were created on Hayden Avenue and how we're spreading that half the density over 18 acres. And go ahead, Kiefer.
Yeah, thank you so much, and I really appreciate you guys considering this proposal.
Can you,
yeah, so this,
for the record again, who's speaking?
Oh, sorry, Kiefer, go ahead.
this is Kiefer Norris.
And your address, Kiefer?
I am in Tampa, Florida.
Very good.
Is Kiefer an expert on the project? Is that?
He's partner, business partner, sorry. Sorry, he's just some guy we met outside, we're just talking.
Phone, okay. I appreciate that, thank you.
Yeah, I saw this. I slept at Holiday Inn Express last night. No, so this slide here is basically what we're looking to do, our proposal of the project. And so what we did is said, and I think one of the gentlemen in the blue shirt kind of brought it up, that if we were to say, put everything in the H7 basin that is allowed to be in the H7 basin, that would be an allocation of 75 units. And how we got to that is we're asking for the 300 feet to be changed from commercial to mixed use. And based on the generation gallons per, this generation calculation that based on the 2020 sewer collection master plan, that would allocate 58.41 units in the H7 basin. And then looking at the additional land that's in the H7 basin, you look at that and you say, well, there's additional land that's in the H7 basin that's 1.4 and 4.13 acres. So a total of almost half our projects is in the H7 basin. And based on the 2020 sewer collection plan, which is what you guys are basing how much use you have and how that affects your H7 lift station, we would be able to put in 75 units. Right now, I think the issue that Alan brought up earlier was, hey, if everybody were to build out their plan, that you'd be over capacity. And MacArthur, can you slide up to slide 9? Oops. Yeah, so that one is, yeah, so this would be, if we were to try to maximize, this slide shows what the density is based on the 2020 plan and how much capacity would be there, right? So this is saying, your 2020 sewer plan looked at this site and said, because it was based on the 2040 Imagine Hayden plan, and it said, okay, you'd be 600 feet south would be mixed use, and that would be a total of 112 units in the H7 basin, and then that additional 1.4 acres would also be in the H7 basin, and that'd be 9.74 acres. So really, we would be contributing 122 gallons into the H7 basin based on the sewer master plan as allocated. So our analysis, and that's what we're saying, we'd love to have Chubb do the analysis. We're willing to do that and validate these facts and say, yes, they would be allocated this amount of units, but really they're using way less. So really we are giving capacity away by sticking to the 4 per acres, not asking for the underlying land use. There's additional capacity based on what the 2020 master plan really states. And it's what Viking did. I mean, they took their capacity and moved it up into those apartments, up into that area. And so they used up all their capacity. Now, if you look at the other adjacent parcels, Atlas and everything else, you would do the same analysis. You would say they have 4 acres. How many units could they put in? It would be very minimal, nominal unit counts. So that's what we're asking. That we're not asking for more. We're just asking to use what we're allocated.
Can you hit slide 11 for me real quick?
Say it again?
Could you move to slide 11 for me?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, anything else to present?
I believe that's it, unless you guys have additional questions.
I have a couple questions. When you purchased the property, you knew it had split lift station zoning, correct?
It was, the line was, and from my professional opinion, the line was in a different location. I wasn't quite sure where the line was. We knew that it had a split zoning. We were under the impression we could ask for the sewer tech memo. In speaking with staff, I mean, I trust what they're saying, and okay, so we move forward with the request for a sewer tech memo, and then this discussion came up, so. Topographically, we analyzed the property before they purchased, and we felt confident moving forward that it would function well within the city regulations and guidelines, and we provided an example of how that might look, knowing that we would be the end of the line, and then we were denied that request.
And can I speak to that briefly as well? Before we purchased the property, we did have a pre-development meeting, and we discussed this item, and that was where the conversation was that we would be able to do a transfer analysis study to determine if it made sense. So, I mean, we have that in our pre-development meeting notes that a transfer analysis study would have to be completed, and that's kind of where we're coming up with this. We're not pulling out of thin air that there was a review would be completed. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. So,
thank you.
I guess we need to move on with deliberations, recommendations, and a decision. Do the commissioners wish to deliberate this or to delay deliberations and decision-making? Go forward?
Yeah, let's go forward.
All right, so we're going to deliberate. Brandon, you've got the remote, so why don't you go first, buddy?
Can you do the zone map amendment first?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, I apologize. We are deciding 2 different things, so to the question of deliberation, I was speaking to PZE 220046, which is the zone map amendments. And so with that in mind, Brandon, do you want to give us your thoughts on PZE 22-046? Thank you, Fonda.
You're welcome.
My thoughts are currently, I want to listen a little more to your guys' deliberation. A lot of what the last speaker spoke to, I think Scott MacArthur, I could barely hear him. Everything that I've got is based off of what I've read and listening to Donna. So you guys go for it, and I'm going to listen for a little bit.
Okay, Keith, you want to go?
Is there any path forward where they can talk more about in H7?
So that's part of the subdivision analysis, so
Right.
stick right this time because you need to make 2 decisions and 2 sets of findings just with the zone map amendment.
Okay.
You're welcome.
And those standards of approval are on the back of the flow chart for zone map amendment, and that's what you're going to need to kind of gear your findings toward.
And that is also the portion where we talked about the potential for a zoning development agreement that would include a condition to meet the requirements of the mixed-use design standards, which would accomplish the calculations for the 10% on the commercial, as well as deal with the parking. and that they comply with the density requirements of the annexation agreement. So those were the two conditions that had been discussed before.
You want to think about it?
I don't have any,
Well, do you feel it meets the, do you feel that it meets the standards of approval for the zone map amendment?
yeah, I don't have any objections to it.
Okay. And any thoughts on these, I believe there was one staff condition of approval. Any thoughts on that? Which was that it included a,
Zoning development agreement?
thank you, zoning development agreement.
Yeah.
All right, Mary?
I think that according to 2040 vision, that it works. And even if Hutter, you know, we always throw out, well, what if Hutter never gets built? We are still growing out that direction, whether it ever gets built or not. So the neighborhood node, which is what they're really proposing, in the middle of the mixed use, you know, the variety of the diversity of housing, which I also think we need, I think is a good choice. So I think that as long as we've got that zoning development agreement that includes, you know, the required amount of commercial, and I think we have an amazing staff, so I'm sure you can come up with what you need as parking requirements and look at your cute little crystal ball, figure out how much of that needs to be required. I think that it's good.
Okay. Joe?
I think they've met the standards that we look at. I think the fact they're only asking for half of what they could ask for based on the future land use works in their favor, knowing the current mood of our council. I think this is where mixed use, this is what it's designed for, where it should be going. Hayden's in our community, regardless of whether Hutter goes in or not.
Right.
So I would recommend approval.
Okay. My thoughts on PZ 220046 are that moving from commercial to mixed use does actually impact, at least, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when we calculate how it impacts H7, commercial traditionally inputs less than going to housing. Part of the lot is R1 right now, but the north part, which falls in H7, is commercial. So just to this case and to future cases, you know, the more we develop mixed use along the corridor, the more we're going to impact H7.
Could we still do conditional use permits to get apartments there, since it's commercial right now? Nope, can't do that
No,
anymore.
you changed your code.
Yeah. So that's the only thing that I've been developing in my mind. But the lot to the right is already mixed use, correct? And so, you know, as I look at the four standards,
The lot to the right,
It's zoned commercial today with a special use permit to allow for those apartments.
sorry.
which
thank
was
you.
done before you changed your code.
Right,
Correct.
sorry. What I was really trying to paint was that it was similarly laid out. It wasn't like it's a true commercial, commercially developed, even though it may be a commercial zone. So I guess for the first part, I guess I'm okay with this, with it, that this does meet the standards of approval, just with the footnote that we should think ahead to how many times we push the mixed use button along Hayden Avenue. So, unless there's more deliberations, Brandon, unless you want to add anything, we can entertain a motion if we so desire.
No, I'm ready to move forward.
Okay, does anybody want to make a motion in the case of PZE 220046, and if you need help, we've got the proposed motion wording in our 3-ring binders. Thank you, Sean.
And in case of PZE 22-0046, I recommend approval with conditions of general development standard or development conditions related to the MU design standards be enforced upon this. Is that,
With a condition that they follow, yes.
if they follow the
Requirements of the
mixed-use
MU
design
design
standards? And also with the condition that the general development follows or complies with the original annexation agreement for this site.
Okay, is that, so you also then support the one staff condition of approval?
Yes.
Okay. Does that sound good, Fonda?
With all the findings that were articulated in your deliberations and in the staff report.
Of course. Thank you. Okay, so sounds like we have a reasonable motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. May we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Bemis,
Yes.
Commissioner Gibson,
Yes.
Commissioner Howard,
Yes.
Vice Chair Taylor,
Yes.
Chair Davis.
Yes. Okay, so PZE 220046 is passed. We now open deliberations for PZE 220076. To the commission, do you want to defer deliberations or deliberate and decide tonight?
Deliberate.
Okay, I'm hearing deliberate and heads are nodding, so let's deliberate. Mary, you want to go first?
Sure. I'll, just in throwing out thoughts, not in trying to formulate any kind of motion, but I really would like to see the JUB analysis before we make any kind of decision on H7, H8, whether to split it, whether to keep it the way it is, whether to combine it into H7. I think I would rather defer to the experts on that. And I think it would probably be a good idea if whatever we recommend waits to go to city council until that has been
We
done.
could do a conditional approval. Right?
You can. So there's two ways to accomplish the goal she's articulating. It's you table everything tonight and it comes back to you after the report is finished. Or you make your motion and assuming it's a motion to recommend approval on the condition that that analysis is completed before this goes to council. So yes, a conditional approval.
Well, we support this in theory. There's some details that are beyond our technical expertise. Here's the technical expertise and the decision to be made, because ultimately we are just recommending approval. We're not deciding tonight. We're just recommending to city council.
With the environment that we're in, I think I would rather it come back to us after that JP. What do you think about that?
Mary, just as an FYI, we were going to notice it for a second public hearing before
Okay.
planning and zoning, before city council.
Okay.
So should
Also, there
the
would-
tech memo come in, we could add it in at the time of a second public hearing with city council. I don't know if that changes where you're going, but I just thought I'd throw that out.
I missed half of yours because of the static that we got there.
So if we're, say that again, just
We
the
were going to
beginning part.
notice a second public hearing before city council.
Uh-huh.
So if you were to propose that this be approved with a sewer tech memo, it would be added into the record at the time of the second city council public hearing.
In other words, they're going to get it anyway. They're going to get the full hearing thing. So my personal opinion to answer your question is, I don't see value in us
And
regurgitating
it coming
this
back
again,
to us, okay.
especially since, again, we're not really deciding if we're beating and supporting city council as we should by giving them all the facts that we can. That would be my personal preference, but again, that's just me as a person.
I was just wondering if we could give them a little bit
More
more
to
clear
chew on.
facts
Sure.
to chew on. But I don't want to belabor it for the applicant either. So,
How about
thoughts
the
from others.
8 standards of approval? Do you feel like they're being met with this application?
I think that the density is good for the city. I think that the connections that this project can make to others removes burden from the city itself. Go through the rest of them. Yeah, and yes, I do
Okay.
think that it meets the standards of approval.
And as far as the 7 staff conditions of approval,
I trust our staff, I would have to include all of their.
well, one of theirs is
approval.
to kick them to H8.
I understand that, and that's the one that I would say I'd like to see the JUB, just because I think that it would be good to have that,
Okay.
a technical look at it for both parties. I think it's good.
You could just simply say that that condition is going to be determined based on JUB's evaluation. Transfer analysis.
All right, very good. Keith, what do you want to add?
Yeah, no.
Are you okay?
Found it good.
Okay, as far as the standards of approval,
Yeah.
feel the same as Mary then?
Yeah, absolutely.
Brandon, your comments on PZE 220076?
They follow suit with what Fonda just followed up on.
Okay, Sean?
I think they met all the standards of approval. I kind of struggle a little bit with this H7, H8 because I think it was a known condition when they bought the property. Our city engineers telling us that it could cost the city a lot of money going down the road. I think the fact that it will actually delay some of the development is going to appeal to council, and I don't see, I mean, we can sit here and deliberate it all night long, and I don't know that they're gonna really see the value in that either, of moving it into H7. So I would recommend approval with all of the staff recommended conditions.
So you're in favor of all 8?
Yeah.
Okay. My thoughts are that, the commercial road areas continue to be developed into housing. Be good or bad, as Mary said, we need it. But obviously, the more housing we put out there, the worse we get. And you guys know I'm a fan of more creative housing. So while I really like the fact there's condos up front, and I do, I equally cringe that we're shoving another development that's packed into 8,000 XXX square feet of house, even if they're allowed a little more, and even if there are a couple more. What the thing that gripes the citizens and city council, as I understand, is just the pack them in like sardines housing developments we're doing.
Do you think, though, with the original annexation agreement that was approved, that's only 4 per acre, and a lot of these single-family lots being larger than 8250?
Yeah, it's good. I mean, I'm not criticizing the developer for developing the land and actually in a couple of places making it better, and again, with the condos making it better, but it's just more
philosophical.
Yeah, I guess it's more philosophical. I guess the way I understand it, and Fauna, if you want to correct me, or if one of the city can correct me, as I understand, in order to make H8 happen, the developers have to come together and say, we're going to build this. If we let every applicant come in, just shove over to H7, then there's never going to create the demand for H8 unless I'm misunderstanding, and then it'll never get built, and more people will come piling on, saying, hey, just give us a break. In other words, I understand the economic impact, it slows down their development, but if it also kicks down the road us ever building H8, that's not necessarily a good thing. And correct me, did I get anything wrong there?
I think there's a lot of split zoning right there, right?
Right, the fact there's so much split zoning, if we keep kicking everybody H7, then the developers.
There's not going to be I cannot foresee a way by which everybody gets kicked to H7.
Right, but
our sewer master plan is not going to
But every time we
support that.
defer asking a developer to go participate with H8, we're delaying H8 getting built. because the city doesn't just walk up and start building it, it's done in conjunction with the developers, correct?
Developers typically install the infrastructure that's
Okay.
required. So if they want to develop, these are the requirements.
Okay.
And in the case of H8, there is no infrastructure.
Yep.
So they have to construct it.
Would they have to develop equal infrastructure to connect to H7 though?
Say that one more time?
If they wanted 100% of the land to go to H7, they would still have to put in some infrastructure for that, right?
The gravity portion would be absolutely the same. The only difference would be the actual lift station and the connection from there to that.
Right.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, there's a cost either way. And so anyway, I guess
To answer your question, though, the difference on this transfer analysis or potential transfer analysis is they have a preliminary plat design with 16 lots that they're specifically asking for.
Right.
Not an entire parcel with an undeveloped, undesigned project that would have to be analyzed at max density. That's a little bit of the difference.
Right. So I think I'm a little on the fence. I think it might be worth 3 more minutes worth of discussion of whether if we do say want to conditionally approve this, do we want to have the study done and kick it up, or do we want to just say it's our recommendation to city council to go with all 7 of the staff recommendations, and then they can of course always overrule that, and at that time demand some kind of a study, right?
Yeah, 'cause they could still look at it and go, well, we want to see the study and maybe we will switch it over. I'm almost thinking of it, I'm trying to save them the money of doing the study because I don't think the city council's going to go for it, but honestly.
Okay.
If I was using my crystal ball. I don't know if can I say that, Fonda? No? Okay, sorry.
Okay, strike that.
Well, we can certainly speculate, it's our opinion.
You can speculate on
It
your
doesn't make it a fact.
But isn't there a value to the roads actually existing? If they were allowed to develop the whole thing, and those roads were as diagrammed conceptually, isn't there a value to the city on that, to where it would promote H8's development because the roads now go somewhere and the other developers can
start developing?
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, that's where my opinion came from.
But I mean, don't you really agree with that though? I mean, isn't there a value to the roads being there?
Yeah, you get the road infrastructure in and the development follows that typically. And
Right.
So, yeah.
So it's again, chicken and the egg, right? If we put the road in, H8 will happen sooner. If we don't put the road in, H8 isn't going to. And maybe the council being.
And your point is the road only goes in if we kick them over to H7?
I'm just saying, let's have the study and see if the experts say good, then great, we get the road.
Well, city council will still have to.
And agreed, but we can't control them, we can only control us.
Give them all the facts.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I was give them the facts. I think this is a good development. I think that they appeal to a wide variety of residents. They appeal to those that like the condos, don't want any yard, want you to do it for them. It appeals to those who want a little bit of space, and it all stays within the agreement of 4 per acre, which is an amazing density. Overall, that's a good thing versus that.
No, I understand. No, it is. It could be a lot worse. Absolutely. I agree.
It could be a lot more
Yep. It could.
rooftops, a lot more houses, a lot more doors.
Do we want to deliberate more? Does somebody want to make a motion?
I mean, I'll just say I do like the little commercial in the middle because it does cut down on driving because people can just go grab some,
Yeah, sure, the grocery in the front,
They're not
super
driving all the way
idea.
down to Super One. So the development itself looks great and I like the concept. And so if they meet all the standards of approval, I think it's an asset to the city. I think we should. And I personally would say just keep them in the 2 basins, but it sounds like the commissioners here would like to at least see the study and let the commissioners make the decision. So
With more facts.
let's go with that.
Okay. All right, so I'm gonna make a motion, please.
You know this is my favorite part. Okay. So, in the case of PZE 220076, I make a motion that we approve with conditions.
Recommend approval.
Recommend, thank you. Recommend with conditions, accepting staff conditions, with the exception of, I guess it's an exception, of.
Striking.
Do I have to strike the?
Just amend the,
Amend 8? Is that what it is 8?
I don't know what the number was.
What?
There's 7 of those.
No, which one is the one for
Number
the?
7.
Number 7?
It's staff recommendation number 7.
With the exception of amending staff recommendation number 7.
To
What?
provide that a transfer analysis will be
Provide that a
completed.
transfer analysis be made through the city engineer, JB,
JUB.
Before this goes to
Before
public hearing
this.
at council.
before this goes to public hearing before city council.
Okay.
Job, man.
Somebody hurry up. Second.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to, for conditional approval, including 7 staff conditions of approval, although modifying number 7 such that the decision to stay or not stay with the HH sewer basin be based on further analysis.
Do we need to put in there that that's paid for by the developer? Because they have offered to pay?
Sure.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Would you like
Doesn't have to be
amend?
part of the motion.
Doesn't have to be part of the motion? Okay, so we've got a motion, a second. I've summarized it so that I think I understand correctly. Fawn is nodding her head. May we please have a roll call?
Commissioner Howard,
Yes.
Commissioner Gibson,
Yes.
Commissioner Bemis,
Yes.
Vice Chair Taylor,
Yes.
Chair Davis.
Yes. Okay, our public hearing section's now done. Thank you, everyone. City, do we have any reports?
Yeah, just 2 seconds. My computer is not liking me.
How many do we,
see 4
how many
reports.
PowerPoints do we leave on, open?
So, we had a kind of a slow start to spring and summer. We had Juneteenth, which is on a Monday. We have way too many Mondays off. It's important to note that land on the first and third Mondays. But I'd really like you guys to think about another night of the week, like Thursday or something.
Not Thursday.
For planning and zoning commission meetings, or maybe every other Tuesday, so you were off from city council. Just throwing out a day, because Mondays are really hard, and then trying to get that noticing time to work, and then trying to find you guys for quorums when we're off makes it really difficult. So think about it, because the calendar for meetings is coming out in the fall, usually late October, November. Just want you to put that in the back of your brain if we're
It's easy
thinking
for you
about.
guys to do opposite Tuesdays of city council. I'm fine with that.
So anyway, everybody think about it. And
You guys want to give up all your Tuesdays?
I just want to not have to try to find a way to reschedule Mondays when we've got Juneteenth, July 4th, and Labor Day weekend, because that makes it really hard trying to make it all work. And then you guys are always trying to figure out how to make it work. So just as kind of a back feed, we worked really hard. I knew this was going to be a more complicated than not conversation, and that's why we put these 2 public hearings on the same night and didn't add additional public hearings. That's part of that. I'd kind of like to be out of here in like 2-hour number instead of the 3-hour number. We have 2 conditional use permits coming up, one on the 28th. Thank you very much for coming in for that. I appreciate that. another one on the 1st of August, and those are separate and distinct because we're anticipating the possibility of folks coming in for both of those, and again, don't want people to get confused as to what we're talking about, but for both of them. And then we have the citywide zone map public hearing. The town hall occurred. We have had really positive turnouts, really good conversations with folks. We've had really good, I can't say it was bad. You were at the public town hall meeting. It wasn't, yeah. So the notices for those will be going out. There's about 550 properties and 400 plus or minus, over 400 actual notices. What we did is we took all the property owners that had multiple properties. We sent them a single notice and kind of took care of that way. And then we'll have about 120 individual posting signs will go out. So you'll see those peppering the city pretty close to the middle to the end of next week. We'll be going around all over with little fluorescent 11 by 17s showing how this zone map affects this property and the surrounding properties close to it. So if you had like 3 properties side by side, it would go on one of them, not on 3 of them. Let's not overcomplicate the situation. But if you had like a subdivision, it'll be noticed on the entrances into the subdivision as well for all of the properties in the subdivision. So that'll happen on the 15th. I don't have a calendar in front of me. On the 15th, right, of August. Then we have to have our written decision or written recommendation of that zone map amendment happen before the City Council's September 13th meeting. And again, we would have a meeting, but we have Labor Day. So we would really like to schedule a meeting on the 29th of August, keeping that consistent with the meeting calendar. And we had thought that maybe that would be a call-in meeting, but we actually have a zone development agreement amendment that will be coming forward at that meeting as well. And then the zone map amendment goes to City Council on the 13th. And then the written decision, the zoning development agreements that go with that written decision, and the ordinance for the resolution for the zone map amendment ordinance for the zone map amendment and resolution. Anyway, however that works. I'm looking at Fonda. Ordinances and resolutions.
Oh, sorry. I was looking at those calendar dates.
Yes. So ordinances and resolutions will come forward for the zone map amendment on the 27th, and that's the 24 hours before the mixed use or multifamily, residential multifamily zone expires.
You heard that, 24 hours.
24 hours
before
it expires.
So do we have a time when we have to adjourn that night?
So we're working on kind of grouping those to come forward for the zone map amendment. The ones that are, going toward single family residential, those that are going toward mixed residential, those that are going toward others. The ones that are not, I wouldn't say they're problem children, but there are some that require some additional conversation to kind of explain how we got where we got to. We'll break them kind of into those parts as we're working through the staff's presentation, and then open it for public hearing, right? Yeah.
Okay. So just the P and Z meetings, we've got a couple of extra ones. Can you just tell me?
July 28th is a Thursday.
Yes.
August 1st is our regularly scheduled meeting.
Yes.
August 15th is our regularly scheduled meeting. I'm requesting one on August 29th or sometime that week. And then we're back to normal.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I
And I
didn't miss one.
apologize for it getting really busy, but part of the reason it got really busy is because of the citywide zone map amendment and the timing related to this. and not being able to put public hearings on that night, because you wouldn't want that. That'd be really ugly.
Okay, any other reports?
Any other questions for me? I did want to let you guys know, if you hadn't heard, that Zach Trevino is no longer with the city of Hayden.
Where did he move to?
He went to Port Angeles.
Apparently likes the rain.
That's actually like the rain.
Well, let him know he'll be missed.
He will be missed. He is missed.
He was very bright. Is very bright.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Do you have any other questions for me?
Nope.
I want to thank Alan and Rob for coming down to help answer your questions. I really appreciate that. And it really is truly a staff review that you're seeing, not just a Dawn's review. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, we're adjourned.
All right, I gotta drive to the airport.
Oh, boy.
You're out of here?
Oh, hustle on over there.
Tonight.